Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am glad that we are here in day 2 of our Islam and finance session. We have our two amazing co-founders of Muslim financial companies. One is Mohamad Sawwaf from Manzil, and then we have Jesse Reitberger from Canadian Islamic Wealth. We would like to welcome them both.
Thank you for having us, Aisha.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
That's great. So I just wanted to say my name is Aisha Malik, and I am a volunteer with NISA Helpline. And we are here to provide resources, whether it's about any sort of financial hardship, mental, physical wellness, any source of challenges that women in our community need. You can definitely seek assistance with us. So without further ado, I would like to start our Islamic and financial session now. I know it's a Sunday and everybody is, at home. Maybe they can just gather their friends and family and relatives, as this is some good information that the sisters should know about, and of course the brothers as well. So we would like to ask a question to Mohamad. We'll start off with you first. In the last sessions, we talked a lot about what is financial literacy, how can we budget, how can we save money, both in the times of crisis and also who are free from the crisis. So let's get into a little bit more viewpoint of Islamic perspective. So I would like to ask you, what does Islam really teaches us about money and any sort of debt that we sometimes fall into?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah, walhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Jazakallah, Sister Aisha, for this question. So it's very simple with respect to kind of the principles of Islamic finance. What we need to remember is that, back in the day of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they didn't have what we call, fiat money, or money that has no value. Right? That's what we call it in the finance. So, all of these currencies that are circulating around the world on a piece of paper or a coin, a metal coin, they actually have no asset behind it, and there is no material value. It is a value based on, a bunch of variables. Whereas back in the time of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they had dinars and dirhams made out of gold and silver, right? A true commodity with a true asset. And so in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that وَحَرِّمُ الرِّبَى وَحَلِّلُ الْبَيْعَ, right? So meaning, riba or usury or lending of money to earn money is impermissible, but trade is permissible, right? So trade-based finance, and this is a very, very important piece. Trade-based finance is halal. What does that mean? It means that if I own something and I want to sell it to somebody, I'm able to and mark it up for a profit, and I can earn a living that way. Or we can go in together on this asset, and we can have some sort of partnership, or I can rent it for you. So these are, the murabaha, the musharakas, and the ijaras of the world. Now, if you come to me and say, well, I want to buy this thing from you, but I can't pay for it in cash fully, can you please give me a payment plan? Well, and I don't have the ability to give you a payment plan, and then you end up going to the bank, getting that money, signing some sort of agreement where you promise to pay them more money, but they never held that asset, then that isn't permissible, right? That is what usury is, right? Is making money off of money because there was no value put into that transaction that they should earn more than what they've given you, right? So this is why in Islam, there's qard hasans, which are these interest-free loans or zero-based loans that basically says, I'm going to lend you $1,000 and you're going to give me back $1,000 in a certain period of time. And that's just a pure money play. Or we can go into trade-based finance where markups can be created and profits can be made and halal revenues can be generated.
Okay, so in simple words, where I got to understand is that the reason Islam kind of teaches us to not promote interest payments is because when we are trading, whether it's a commodity with each other or money, So say if his sister comes to me and she says she needs to lend $1,000, and then I say, okay, you have to give me $1,000 back in 4 months. There's no point of me charging interest on that 4 months because there's no value to that. And
that's right. Yes.
Okay.
And the only way that you could make more money off of that is if the other sister who accepted that money wanted to give you like a gift, right?
Okay.
But it would be in the form of a gift. It wouldn't be you telling her, oh, sister, can you give me an extra $100 as a gift? Wink, wink. That doesn't come from you as the, let's say, the person who provided the card. It would come from the other person who took it and was appreciative of that.
Okay. Would you like to add something to that, Jesse?
Yeah, well, just a couple things, right? When we look and think about money, and I think often, we as Muslims forget this, is that all of our risk, all of our money comes from Allah, right? And so a lot of the time we fall into this, oh, well, it's my money. I need to hold on to this and of course, like, we need to be understanding of our money, careful of our money, all of these things. But there is that obligatory zakat that comes once you've reached that minimum nisab, right? So we need to always be conscious of the fact that we have to give our zakat because it is one of the 5 and most neglected pillars of our faith. The other thing is recognizing debt. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said that aside from the major sins, dying without having an asset to pay off a debt is a very serious matter, right? So we have to understand and appreciate that the risk from Allah is something that we are obligated to pay our zakat on, and the poor have a right over that money to us. And keeping in mind that debt is not something to be kind of trifled with and to trivialize. It's a very serious matter to pay back the debts that we do fall into, especially in this credit-based system. Like, figuring out ways that if something were to happen to you, how are these debts going to be taken care of? Because the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wouldn't pray janazah on somebody with debt. So understanding those severities and seriousness is something that I think we all just need to remind ourselves of.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you 2 questions based on listening to what you just said. I wanted to know, you said that, of course, zakat is, one of the 5 pilgrimages of pillars of Islam. How much zakat does a person need to give out?
So it's 2.5% of their wealth, and there are some intricacies in calculating out specifics and things like that. But in general, first of all, you are required to have a nisab, which is the equivalent of 3 ounces of gold, and hold that for a period of a year. And then off of that 3 ounces of gold, the equivalent of that is about $5,500 US. You pay 2.5% on that wealth, and anything kind of above that. There are some, intricacies in there, especially because we live in Canada. So if you have certain locked in accounts that you can't liquidate as cash or things like that, then that changes the calculation out a little bit. But 2.5% as bare bones is what you would do.
Okay. And one more interesting point that you brought up in your saying is that you said Prophet Muhammad wouldn't even read janazah if there's money is owed. What are some of the ways that people can take care of that matter? Because sometimes, say accidents happen and, someone's all of a sudden death occurred. How would they then deal with that matter? What would their leftover debt, how would that be paid then? That could be open to Jesse or Mohamad.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question, inshallah. So what I've seen personally is, like, at the janazah, because everyone is there in terms of family, friends, and let's call it the community. One of the next of kin, whoever that may be, would actually make an announcement, and they would say, if there are any debts owed to you by so and so, whether it be my father, my brother, my sister, my mother, whoever that may be, please come and see me directly. And so they would take that responsibility to ensure that those debts are paid off via any loans that may have happened between community members, right? That's one piece. Then the other piece is, well, what if there are debts between you or that individual and an institution, a bank, a financial services? So it's a little bit lengthy process, because here in Canada, there has to be some sort of power of attorney, or, you have to be the executor of the estate. And once you are able to, get that mandate of being able to administer that, then it will be your responsibility to ensure that those debts are paid off, inshallah. So, typically one person would step up to take on that responsibility.
Okay, thanks for that information.
I'm back. I don't know what happened.
Oh,
When did you leave?
I don't know. It cut me out or something like that, and then it brought me back in.
well, I'm glad you're back with us. But your picture was still there, so I thought you were still in with us. But maybe
I don't know. It kicked me out and then let me back in. So alhamdulillah.
I'm glad you're back with us. It's okay. This is like, as I said, we're living in a new world, new era. We're learning and practicing. So let's get into a little bit more of a family situation. If you want to get into, we want to talk about women and their financial rights. What are some of the women's financial rights in Islam? Whether you can talk about it from a perspective of a sister, wife, daughter. What are their rights, and I guess the second question could be that who's really responsible to take care of the woman in household financially?
Yeah, I can answer that if you want, Jesse.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, what's beautiful about our religion is that, especially when it comes to women's rights, everything is laid out in the Quran and the Hadith. And in fact, in the Quran, chapter 4 is Surah An-Nisa, right? Which is the chapter of women. Allah didn't create Surah Al-Rijal or Al-Rajul, right? So the chapter of men. There is no such chapter. And this was specifically created so that women can understand their rights when it comes to marital relations, when it comes to inheritance, when it comes to their financial responsibilities that are upon them from their male counterparts, and what they can do with their own money. And so Surah An-Nisa opens up by saying, بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O humanity, be mindful of your Lord who created you from a single soul, and from it he created its mate. And through both he spread countless men and women. Be mindful of Allah in whose name you appeal to one another, and honor family ties. Surely Allah is ever watchful over you. And the importance of this is, this piece is used in the openings of many khutbahs. We always hear about this piece, right? And this is the first ayah, first verse of Surah An-Nisa. And so what I want to focus on are two main rights upon women when it comes to financial dealings, okay? It is the responsibility of the man to provide for the female, whether it be his daughter, his wife, or potentially if there is no husband left or father available in the picture, then it becomes the responsibility of the son. So from birth to marriage, right, to even after marriage, right, the responsibility of that woman being financially stable is on the man. This is the Islamic rulings, okay? And so now there are two pieces that we need to focus on, right? So if you are a woman that is working, right, that has a job, then you need to remember, right, that your money is your money, right? You have no obligation under Islam to help your household or to provide, with that money through the household. Now, you can choose to do so at your own will, and that would be provided a gift to the household, right? But a man cannot expect that from you or require that of you, okay? So let's make that very clear, right? So if you do it out of the goodness of your own heart because of, whatever issues there may be, it could be financial or non-financial, or you just want to have a better lifestyle, you want to provide for your children, you want to provide for anybody else, that is your money and nothing can be said or done about it, okay? So that is number one. Number two, when it comes to divorce, right? Because in Islam, divorce is allowed, even though it's, an extreme, situation where all things have to, hopefully, try to be amendable before we get to that. But at the end of the day, there is the obligation amongst that the ex-husband or the spouse to provide for you and to provide for your children, right? From a financial perspective, okay? And then, of course, there is the inheritance piece. Now, the inheritance piece is very complicated. Surah An-Nisa lays out a lot of those situations, whether you have a brother or a sister, or if there's a mother or a father in the picture, or not. In fact, there are actually 185 different situations that Islamic inheritance covers based on your situation, right? And so, that can seem overwhelming, but there are tools out there, specifically like muslimwill.ca. It is a Canadian website, so for our US sisters or anybody outside of Canada, it wouldn't be applicable. And they only have this drafted for Ontario for now, but inshallah they'll expand to that. But muslimwill.ca allows you to create that Sharia compliant will in accordance with the Ontario laws. And this way you can protect your family from that. So I know that was a lot, probably in one answer, but hopefully if we can dissect that a little further, inshallah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you said that there in Quran, of course, whoever had read Quran, there are a lot of aspects and there's a lot of information. I feel like it's a book of guidance for sure. And if people would just follow through that, understand their rights, and oblige by it, it could be beneficial, because a lot of the times people base a lot of their financial concerns or oppose financial things on, from cultural perspective or societal,
100%.
rather than religious.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where the sort of disadvantages for a woman comes in. So I just wanted to
the other 2 points I wanted to make with respect, because I don't want the audience in the group to start to be running off and being like, okay, my money is now my money, your money is now my money. Like, let's all remember that this is a family unit. It requires teamwork, right? Everybody knows the situation that they're in. And let's also not forget or keep in mind that the majority of divorces are due to financial hardship, right? So as a family unit, it's very important to have that communication, to have that understanding with respect to the family finances or the budget. And at the end of the day, it's a sadaqah that you are doing as a female towards your family anytime you are supporting the family, right? Out of your own goodwill. This will not go overlooked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Inshallah. Jesse, would you like to contribute some?
Yeah, just to add to that, obviously in marriage, the mahar, right? Forgive me if I said that incorrectly, but women do have this right of a mahar, like their bridal gift before getting married, and there is no limit as to how much you request. There are certain hadith out there and things that say that smaller is definitely preferable, and making it easy for the men to do it is preferable. But you can ask for whatever you want, and you can ask for it up front, and you can put these things in your marriage contract, and you are under no obligation to spend that mahar on your family, on anything. Like, you can do with that as you see fit. So I have met with a lot of Muslim sisters who wanted to ask about investing and things like that, and investing just after they got married, and I just asked, like, well, why don't you start with your mahar, right? And she's like, oh, well, I didn't ask for it, or he said he's going to pay it to me in installments and different things like that. If that's what you guys agree on, by all means, but you do have that right to ask for it up front, and for him to pay and things like that. So like, let's not forget about the importance of the mahar within the Islamic tradition.
I think that's a very great question you brought about mahar, because from my understanding, I feel that if what I've seen as growing up, when the mahar is negotiated or talked about, it's never with the bride. It's always with the men of the household.
No, and
Go ahead.
And let's be very clear on this. The mahar is for the woman. It is for her, right? It's not for, you're not buying her from her father, right? Like it's an interesting story actually. So when I first became Muslim, right, I was talking to a few potential candidates for marriage, and the funny thing was, like, one time when I was just Muslim, like maybe 2-3 months of being Muslim, right? And so this one guy from the mosque is like, well, let me introduce you to someone. You might get married to her, you might like her, whatever the case may be. And her father came in and he's like, to marry my daughter, you have to pay me $25,000. And I was like, pfft, and I got up and I left because
Wow.
she wasn't even there. Like, I hadn't met her. I'd seen a picture, all this kind of thing. And he was expecting him to get the 25,000. And like, I'd read the Quran. I was by no means an expert. I know it's supposed to go to her, not him. So I'm not saying
Exactly.
you shouldn't be respectful of the wali, all this other type of stuff, but the meher is for the wife, the woman you are intending to marry, not her family. If she wants to give it to her family, that's her business, but it's for her.
Okay. That's a very interesting point, and I'm glad that you brought that up as an example. Just to add on to that, would you like to say anything about it, Mohammed?
Yeah, like, it's we've all seen this within the Arab cultures, the South Asian cultures, and there's this intertwining, right, between religion and culture, and sometimes it's very hard to figure out what is religious or Islamic law in terms of Sharia and what is just based on cultural tradition, right? And so, I don't know about how it is in the South Asian, but like for the Arabs in the room, there's also this thing called mahar and mu'akhar, right? Which is, the dowry up front, but then there's kind of this end payment, right? And traditionally, right, in culture, a lot of people think that, oh, my mahar is, let's just say it's 10,000, and my mu'akhar is 100,000, meaning like if there was a divorce, then that would be paid. When in fact, actually, the 10 plus the 100 is your mahar. The mu'akhar just means that I am going to defer the other 100 or whatever it is because I don't have that money with me today. But that is still the obligation of the man to provide that mu'akhar, right? Whether it be on the ending of a marriage or even throughout the marriage, because that is actually considered their mahar, right? They should be getting it all up front, but because of the financial situation of the potential groom, there was a decision made to say, well, we'll take this now and you can gift her the rest even along the way, right? So even during the marriage, the husband can come and say, here's some money and, this is part of your ma'akhar, right? So it'll be deducted as long as you agree, right? As long as the wife agrees. So I don't know how it is, but there is, this within the Middle Eastern traditions and cultures that I wasn't aware of. And then once you start to learn more and you dig deeper, you're like, oh, okay, like this isn't like just for on a divorce situation. This is actually it's her right now.
Actually, this is the first time I'm hearing about mahar and
Mu'akhar.
mu'akhir as well. Sorry, my Arabic is not that great.
I can't say it either.
Before. So I think this is a great topic that Kate came up on us right now, because I feel that a lot of women, who are housewives and sometimes they're, just so busy taking care of the kids and the household. I feel like if we start having these conversation about mahar, not from the start, but like thinking about it, and if they would like to invest, as Jesse said, there were, a lot of women right after marriage that came in. I think that could be a great benefit to them for future financial hardships. Say, like right now during pandemic, if women were more open and confident and empowered about talking about this, about their meher right, they can use that opportunity to actually invest in something for themselves, or as you said, for the household or their kids. So that's great. We're going to move on to the next question now. And, I'll ask this to Jesse. As you know, like, women wear a lot of different hats in relationships and in their households. So if we're talking about marriage itself, since we're, in this conversation, what are some of her financial concerns before a woman is married and then after she's married?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you know, as we've spoken about before, realistically, like she
Mhm.
should have no financial concerns, right?
Yeah.
Because it is the obligation on men to provide for their women, and we see this in chapter 3 verse no sorry chapter 4 verse 34 of the Quran. Like men are the caretakers of women, right?
Mhm.
And so you know, before she's married, you know, her father or her wali should be providing her needs. As a mother, if you are divorced or widowed or whatever the case may be, you know, it is the obligation on your sons and the other men in your
Mhm.
life to be providing for you. If you are married, it is the obligation on your husband to be providing for you. And we can get into more details, but realistically, like that does kind of go into why inheritance is set up the way it is within Islam, and different things like this. So you know, realistically, and from a religious perspective, women don't really have financial obligations. Like if they choose to take on financial obligations, that like that, you know, many of the imams I've spoken to says this is considered sadaqah, right? Like
Mhm.
you're giving charity to your household by helping pay that water bill or your phone bill or whatever the case may be. And it's actually kind of a funny story. So there, you know, this woman who was my assistant for kind of the longest time,
Mhm.
you know, she was you know, in her 20s. She was working, you know, she was making money, and her father, he would still pay all of her bills, right? Like he'd still pay her phone bill and for her car and for all these other type of things. But her brother, and like one time, you know, I kind of overheard them talking on the phone, and she's like, well, I can pay for my own stuff. He's like, no, you're a woman, this is my job as your father, I'm paying for your bill. It's like, well, why don't you pay for the brothers? It's like, because they're men, they can go make their own money. Like, so you know, but this actually allowed her
Mhm.
to save and invest most of the money that she was earning from working for me and her other jobs, and so she actually has like a pretty good safety net to fall back on, you know, if something were to happen, right? And so to the sisters out there who are listening to this, like remember your financial rights, and the money that you choose to earn, whether it be through getting a job or maybe starting that side business or whatever the case may be, you know, my advice would be to save that money and to invest that money and to have that safety net, so that if you do find yourself in a situation of divorce, you know, widowed, whatever the case may be, you can meet some of your financial obligations without it being, you know, extremely stressful or going into debt or anything like that. So, but I'm sure Mohammed has you know, more insight into this topic than I do.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to add to that, and those are all very good points, Jesse, and thank you for bringing those up, is, you know, to all the sisters listening, let's not lose sight of the fact that, you know, if you do not have your own, let's call it job, or, you know, you're not earning an income into the family, that, you know, there still has to be some sort of support from a perspective of budgeting. I don't mean financial support. I mean, like, you know, okay, this is how much money we make as a family unit, and we're going to stick to that budget to not put ourselves in debt, right? Now, if that is something that is of concern to you, or you want a better lifestyle, but you know that, you know, the breadwinner in the family is limited with respect to his earnings, then of course, you know, you may go out and get a job and, you know, provide that sadaqah back to the family, right? But let's not lose sight of the fact that there's the budget needs to be respected in terms of whatever those earned incomes do come into the family, inshallah.
Yeah, and I did want to add on to that just a little bit there, in the sense that remember that the necessities, the needs are what the man is obligated to provide, right? And so if you are looking for a like Chanel bag, or you know, some Gucci perfume or different things like this, right? Like
Mhm.
probably to be a good husband, you know, providing you gifts every now and then, that's on him. But if this is a regular thing you're wanting to spend money on, then the conversation changes a little bit. So just remember that.
Well, not only that, but then it ends up burdening the husband, right? So
Yeah.
that's what you end up doing, because you know of the particular capacity and you're trying to exceed that capacity, right? And so that is also not beneficial towards the family either.
I think that's great, and I kind of want to touch base on what Jesse brought up. I love Jesse's stories, by the way, from last time. How you said that what is really important to a person, you know, whether it be a man or a woman, how is, you know, having coffee every day, adding $5 to it, Or is it really saving that $5 every day to go on a trip, or investing in going to Hajj, inshallah, or something like that? So I think that's something that a household can make a combined decision if what is that they prefer. I feel like that both of you guys did your homework today, because before even getting into the next question, you guys are already touching in on the topics, which is great. So you already touched based on how like a man and a wife should be contributing to their financial needs and preventing conflicts. What are, say, some of like techniques or like that the spouses can really take before even falling into the financial hardship, or as you said, a lot of the divorces happen due to that. Is there a way that we can prevent it somehow?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the one of the main things is obviously having that discussion, right? And I'm talking even before you get married, right? Like having an understanding of sort of your values when it comes to money and what you're expecting kind of out of the marriage from a financial perspective and things like that are all things that I'd recommend talking about up front, right? Because at the end of the day, like as a husband, I do my best to provide for my wife, and I've made it very clear from the beginning on how I intend to do that. And if that was not going to fit in with her plans and what she wanted to do, then it may have not been a great idea for us to get married, and vice versa, right? So having that discussion right up front about kind of what you guys are expecting and trying to, I would say, achieve would be probably the first step in that journey. And then after that, having those regular conversations about what you're trying to do and what the financial situation is really. And I think that one of the biggest problems that I see when it comes to financial, like I do have clients who are non-Muslim as well. One of the biggest problems I see is that oftentimes, the spouses do not communicate what's going on with their own personal finances, right? And so, you may have someone who ends up in large amounts of debt, or you may have someone who spends money excessively and things like that. And really the issue comes when it blindsides the other person, in the sense that, okay, well, now we've got to pay back $20,000 of credit card debt plus interest. I have no means of doing that. And then there's all this headbutting, and she's like, well, you should be able to provide more money for me, and he's like, well, you should be more responsible, and it never ends well for anyone. And then if that divorce happens, I'm not even talking from an Islamic perspective, I'm just talking in general, then both people usually end up in a worse financial situation than they were in when they were married and struggling, right? So just having those conversations, regularly checking in, and I would say being transparent with the people, the most important people of your life are all things that are going to lead to helping with this type of thing.
That's true. That's hefty information. Just to go off of that, I would like to ask Mohamad. I'm going to use like an example from like young generation, today's era. A lot of people who come in and in Americas, and then they go to school, they have a lot of student loan, whether it be OSAP or bank loan or something. And when you get married, when a sister is getting married, is her debt considered to be paid by her husband, or she's solely responsible to pay her prior debt before marriage?
That's a very good question. And I've actually heard of, people actually end up not getting married as a result of that. And so I don't want to say what the Islamic example is, but I'm just going to talk to you guys about my thought process, right? So, let's say that a single lady was obviously studying, and it was under the household of her parents, right? So technically speaking, it should be the parents' responsibility, right? Now, if she's getting married to somebody, right, and that family unit is going to inherit that debt, there definitely has to be some sort of communication ahead of time with respect to, the responsibility of that debt, right? Now, some males, they don't care, right? Because they look at everything as, a combined unit. Oh, okay, she's going to be working, so she's going to pay it off. I also have my own school debt, so I'm going to pay it off too, right? But I think it's a very important conversation because I've seen, let's call it engagements break down pre-wedding as a result of that, right? Because that new potential husband didn't want to inherit that school debt that he thought she was either going to pay off ahead of time or the parents were going to pay it off for her ahead of time, right? So I think from an Islamic perspective, definitely it's the responsibility of the male of the household, right? Now, from the inheritance piece, I think that's just the piece in terms of like how that's being communicated, and it needs to be set up front because nobody wants to get hit like with a surprise, right? Like especially, and it's not even just a debt perspective, right? It could be like in North America we have credit scores, right? Like somebody who's just not responsible paying back their payments on a timely fashion, and they have a really, really bad credit score, and then now they want to go buy a house together, but one credit score is good and the other person's credit score is bad, right? So again, that has to be part of that communication to better understand what that person has been involved with in the past, and so that it's all clear up front, right? Because if it's not clear up front and then there's these surprises after the fact, it's it becomes quite difficult.
I guess that's why, when the surprise come in, that's where the divorce rates are getting higher. That's true. So, as Jesse did mention a bit about, just kind of having that open conversation agreement with newlyweds about their, finances and initial stages about combining incomes. What are some of the I guess main questions they could ask each other?
Yeah, so I mean, I think to start off with, I would simply ask like, what are you expecting, from a financial perspective in our household, right? Like, the husband and the wife, prior to marriage, I would ask that question, like, what lifestyle are you expecting, right? Because if I'm a physician, I can probably provide a fairly good lifestyle, fairly high end lifestyle for just about anyone, right? But if I'm work a 9 to 5 job at a factory, perhaps I won't be able to provide that same level of lifestyle. And so if the lifestyle aspect is an important factor in your decision to marry someone, and by no means should you feel bad about that, because everybody has different tastes, and there are different factors that you can use to screen a potential spouse, right? But having that conversation with them before you move things forward is something that should be done, because getting hit with a surprise that someone's, this is sort of a Canadian say, someone has a caviar tastes but has a mac and cheese budget, right? It's like you got to kind of figure that out beforehand, right? So having that would be my first step, and then having some sort of conversation about what the expectations are going to be in regards to work, and whether or not the woman intends on contributing to the finances of the household, right? Because she is not obligated, but she certainly can. And so having that that cash flow in mind when you guys are deciding how you're going to spend your money, how you're going to save, how you're going to invest, all of those factors are certainly important. Whenever I'm setting up a financial plan for people, right, I always am still going to be asking, okay, do both of you work? Do both of you contribute to the household expenses? All of these things, because it's important to know that if we are going to create an investment plan, a strategy, all these kind of things.
That's true. I'm glad that we're able to, from Mohamad, we get a bit of Middle Eastern aspect into this. And then from Jesse, we kind of get the Western ideologies mixed together. So I feel like that our audiences are getting the best of both worlds. And, I appreciate that. I kind of want to, get into a little bit of, a dark topic, which, as Nisa Helpline is there to provide support and empower women during their hardships or any sort of issues. Many women, unfortunately, they face a lot of abuse in their relationships, whether it be from their family household, whether it be in their in-laws household, spouses. And of course, there's a lot of financial abuse, especially for people and women who are not well aware of their rights, who never really had to take any financial responsibility, because here, as Mohamad said, that their father is or brothers are responsible for them, and then after marriage, it's their husband who's responsible for them. So when women who are caught off guard and they're stuck in these financial hardships, I kind of want you to, and this is for Mohamad, if you could explain in your own words, what is financial abuse? Why does it happen? And how can we really have the sisters deal with it?
I think financial abuse comes from basically this patriarchal method of just basically abusing your position, right? Or there's definitely there's this inferiority / superiority complex, right? And so sometimes it happens when one person is providing the income and the other person is zero, or one person is providing more income than the other, right? Or one person is more financially savvy than the other person. I've seen many situations where the woman is actually taking care of the finances versus the husband, because the husband just doesn't lack that wherewithal or isn't financially savvy, right? But of course, in the context of nisa, that's really the premise, I feel, right? But now, if these men truly understood the religion, right, and they understood the rights and obligations that these females are supposed to have, then this wouldn't happen, right? So what needs to be focused on here, if at least from the sister's perspective, is make a lot of dua for hidayah in these situations. Try and move that individual or the husband towards the deen more and more so, right? Sometimes financial abuse comes from the form of I've seen situations like this, like they're gambling, they have drinking problems or alcoholic problems, maybe some drug abuse or drug substance abuse, and so that becomes a financial burden because those cost a lot of money. And so money is being directed towards these sinful activities and hence not being provided towards the needs of the family and the children, right? And so, these are very, very difficult situations, right? And my recommendation, if you can spot it early, and there is the ability for you to create your own income, even if it's a small one, and you can basically save it to the side to actually build up that buffer or that safety net, as Jesse likes to say, that would be one way, right? But recognizing these multiple forms of financial abuse is key to being able to proactively find a solution for your situation. And the solution may not be imminent. It may be a dragged on situation. Sometimes financial abuse is they're just not being provided with any, let's call it, you want to call it an allowance, you can call it an allowance, right? So they're being completely shunned out from any of that stuff, and it's like, okay, you want to buy this, I have to buy it for you, or the only thing, if you want to buy something, you have to get my okay from it, something like that, right? Again, these are all forms or types of potential financial abuse between partners. And so recognizing it early, having a plan in place to proactively move towards the deen, or get that spouse to move towards the deen, and potentially finding something on your own, if you're already not doing that, is probably, in my opinion, the best way to go about it.
Okay. That's a lot of information. And while I was listening to it, and I was thinking about it, that we are touching based on a lot of a demographic where it's like newlyweds, or a woman in general. I do want to kind of touch base on elderly women, who face a lot of financial abuse, whether it be financial neglection, sometimes within your families, people end up cheating away from them because sometimes due to age, dementia, things like that. There's a lot of financial abuse that elderly women go through, especially who are single and left out. So if Jesse wants to add something to it, and then Mohamad, you can carry on, that'll be great, because I feel like that's a demographic we should reach as well in our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So, and this once again goes back to the core of kind of what I do and what we do. So, facts are facts. Women tend to outlive their husbands. So, and oftentimes, elderly women do end up being neglected, not just in the Muslim community, but by the greater community in general, right? They end up in these care homes and these different, situations, and within our Muslim community, even in that situation, there is certainly some neglect there. So I would say, if you are not in that position, look, because the first step before anything is if you can plan ahead, you're winning, right? So if you are not in that situation right now, if you are, in an elderly demographic, even before that, having some sort of plan in place now to set you up for these eventualities is something that I highly recommend. And even if all you can afford is $25 a month, 50 a month, something that you're setting aside regularly for the eventuality that you may end up, widowed, you may end up divorced, you may end up, an elderly person living on your own. Now, like, best case scenario would be that your children would be helping you, and the men within your like your sons would be helping you, and all these other type of things. But you always have to ask yourself, what if they're not able to, right? What if they've moved away? What if, like, there's all these what ifs, right? So planning for that eventuality now, if you are not in that situation, would be like the number one thing I would say. So looking at where you're at right now, and what you would need to be comfortable, to have your basic necessities met, because at the end of the day, right, although the ideal situation is that you would be taken care of, the reality is some people are not. And so, only you can kind of rely on you for making sure that your basic needs would be met. And of course, understanding that there are, especially because we live in Canada, there are things that the government will provide you: your old age security pension, basic social assistance, and how to learning how to access these programs if you're currently in that situation, are things that I would be looking into as well.
Okay. Would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to elaborate on the piece when you talked about some of the older women that go into dementia, right? Or have a state of forgetfulness. It's important to have powers of attorneys in place for both financial and for health, right? There's two sets of power attorneys. These are called living wills, and these act as basically, let's call them, they make decisions on your behalf through somebody else that you completely trust. And that's the most important piece, is that you need to have somebody that you completely trust to handle your financial affairs or any of the health matters should you continue to deteriorate from that perspective. And there has been abuse from that. I've seen it, right? Where people have powers of attorneys from other people and they wipe out their accounts clean, right? And then there's no money left. Because they thought they could trust this individual, and it ended up being that they couldn't. So, this is a very important estate planning piece. And so powers of attorneys can help you still have that control, as long as you can find somebody of ableness, of strong faculties, that you're willing to entrust to make those decisions on your behalf.
That's
Agreed.
Yeah, I feel like that was something that I wanted to touch based upon for sure. Just because I feel like that there is, we need to start paying attention to a lot of single elderly women in our community as well, who are going through difficulties and challenges. Since we did talk a lot about divorces and financial rights, this question is open to Mohamad or Jesse. Is there a specific amount, that by Islamic law that a woman should inherit when she is divorced, or amount that the kids should inherit when they're separated, the parents are separated?
Yeah, so from my understanding, from a divorce perspective, there isn't a specific amount, right? That will be based on the needs, the amount of children, to provide basic necessities, right? And in fact, the 40 days after the divorce is the requirement on the man to continually support her. And then the support actually ends up, the long-term support goes to the children, right? When it comes to a female being widowed, then of course there are certain percentages based on a whole family situation, whether there are still parents alive, brothers and sisters alive, or number of children that are based on the household. That is all stipulated within the Quran and the Hadith as part of the Islamic will, or the wasiyah. So I would always say, right, and in Canada it's different, right? Let's not forget that in Canada, right, women have the right to, let's call it 50% of the wealth that they build as a family unit together, right? So if me and my wife came into a marriage and we start off at zero and we bought a house, and that house was worth $500,000 after the mortgage, like we paid it off, we would end up probably getting 250 each, right? This is definitely obviously in favor, right, of the women, because that would obviously be used for her, whether she's working or not, right? This would be used for her to sustain herself continually. If there's a difference in income, there could be alimony at play, and then of course there would be child support up until they go to the age of university. So when you think about it with respect to how the Canadian legal system deals with these types of situations, it's definitely great for the women, and I think it respects the Islamic tradition in that respect, because with Islam, unless it's not written down as part of the kitab or the marriage contract up front, then it's very, very difficult in terms of how these sums come about, right? Because my cost of living in Toronto is definitely different than Jesse's cost of living in Winnipeg, right? So there's different situations, different lifestyles that are in play, different costs of living that are in play, to make sure that these numbers are calculated and attributed appropriately to sustain that lifestyle post-marriage.
Okay. That's a lot of information, but I'm glad that we're talking about this, honestly. Jesse, do you want to contribute to some of that?
What was the question? I got kicked out again.
Oh no, we see your face, but then it's okay. Well, we talked about what are like some of the financial rights that a woman have when she is divorced, and what's your perspective on it, I would say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, again, we do live in Canada, so there are certain laws that are in place here. But again, she has rights on those who are obligated to take care of her, the men in her life. And so if she were to get divorced and the children are of age to take care of them, the boys would be responsible for that, or the father, or different things like that. But of course, Mohamad's answer was far more eloquent than the value that I could add to this specific topic. So yeah, so just reiterating that, and it all goes back to, once again, planning for these eventualities, right? These circumstances. So I did mention in the last video, having that death folder, having it, or you can call it your divorce folder, but talking about it as a death folder is probably makes things a little bit easier to understand where all the assets are, to understand kind of what you're obligated to sorry, not obligated, what your rights are, different things like that, and understanding kind of where everything is. So like, even if you are not a financially savvy person, having the absolute basic understanding of how your family's finances are working are really important. And my mom, she's not Muslim, but she has very, very little knowledge when it comes to financial matters, right? Like she can do a budget, and that's it, which it puts her ahead of quite a few people. But if things were to go down, because I work in this space, like it would help her quite a bit. But there are certainly women out there that, if a divorce were to happen, if a death were to happen, even something as simple as setting up how do I pay my rent or my hydro bill, or whatever the case may be, are things that they have not learned to do. So understanding those very basic things and preparing yourself for that time, that if this were to happen, I would be prepared. So it sounds like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but
No,
it's true. Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself.
No, Jesse, we actually had quite a buzz about a death folder. Our sister, we were just all talking about it. And I wish that we could kind of see it in like a template, or maybe some sort of questionnaire or something, that we could resonate with or kind of go on from it. Just because when you talk about debt folder, of course, people are going to watch this session and then they're kind of going to forget about it the next day. But if there's any way that the sister can actually, see it on paper or online somewhere, how to do it or what's needed, I think that'll be a great benefit and asset for them. I know I started to continue to do that. So I'm going to encourage other sisters as well. So, this session was definitely very detailed oriented, as like last one was too. And we got to learn a lot about Islam and, our financial rights as a woman or men in general too. Just to talk about like a final takeaway point, what is like the role of Muslim community in supporting women? What responsibility does the Muslim community have in supporting, say, single mothers, divorced women, or widows?
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, because I think this is where we fail as a community or as a religion, especially here. Well, especially, in back home countries where all of these things are just taboo, right? You're not allowed to get divorced. You can't have any sort of, disabilities within your family. Like those are all frowned upon, and there are no services. There's no infrastructure to help support that, right? Whereas here in Canada or in North America, we see that there's these support systems and these infrastructures in place outside of the Muslim community. But even within the Muslim community, we're starting to see, remnants of that slowly but surely. And we're starting to normalize these conversations, which is a very important piece. And so, when it comes to, anybody that gets divorced or widowed or needs some sort of support, because sometimes they're the only people here, right? A lot of their families back home, they immigrated here with that individual that they love. And then now the situation didn't work out. And that's where we actually need to step in as a community, right? Some of these situations are zakat eligible, right? So even our own zakat al-mal can help fulfill these situations and make them better. And at the end of the day, if it's not zakat eligible, at least it's a sadaqah, right? The mosques, the community centers, the Nisa homes of the world, the Sakina homes of the world, they're all responsible for making this happen. But what's even a bigger responsibility is us as Muslims supporting these organizations in order to help them, because I know that there's a shortage. There isn't enough supply to keep up with these situations that are happening. And they do happen. Like, let's not turn a blind eye and think that they don't happen. They may happen in secret. And there's a reason for that, because people are embarrassed. People, are afraid. People don't know where to get the help. People might be scapegoated. They don't want to have that stigma, right? And that's where we fail as a Muslim society, especially locally. And we need to start to change that rhetoric, because these are dire situations where people's lives are on the line, and there needs to be the support of the community in order to tell them that this is okay. That there needs to be that hope and that light in order for them to think that they'll be able to get out of these situations and become better citizens within the fabric of the community, inshallah.
That's a wonderful thing. You're absolutely right that, there's just not enough knowledge about it. There's so much stigma attached on your right asking for help, and people are just so ashamed of the word divorce. Or however, if you look at it from Islamic perspective, there's so many rights that a woman has, even when it comes to divorce. And I feel that it's not just part of like, I think that a lot of male who have the power or authority, when there's a lot of Islamic scholars, if they start conveying message and have these open conversations, I feel like that as Muslim myself, and we can gather out in a community and actually help people who truly need it. And I think that would be a great asset to our society. Jesse, what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, Mohamad hit the nail on the head, right? Like, I think there certainly is a lot of stigma, and even within our community centers, within our masjids, within all these different places, unfortunately, and I think this is highly due to culture, you know, the women don't really have a space to kind of call their own. Like, you know, certainly the back of the masjid with the curtain pulled, or behind a wall, or whatever the case may be. But that's not really what the essence of what the Muslim community and Muslims are supposed to be doing. Like, if we go back to the time of the caliphate of Umar, radiallahu anh, right? Like, as an Islamic state, as an Islamic community, like, the basic needs of all of our people, man, women, children, are provided, right? Regardless of your situation. So you are a human being, you are a woman, you are entitled to this from your community, from your country, from, you know, these type of things. So in my opinion, the rights of women, or any person within our Muslim community, is the fact that they have their basic needs met, regardless of you know, their mental situation, their physical situation, whatever the case may be. So us kind of going back and learning those lessons from our tradition is something that's really, really important, understanding what the implications of that are today on our communities. So that's one thing. And obviously, you know, we live in Canada, resources are not all readily available, but, you know, having those times of education, and starting to understand that having, you know, mental health experts within our community who also understand the Islamic tradition are all things that I think are really important, right? So, you know, and I can't speak for all masjids, but, you know, I've heard the you know, hours and hours of lectures on dhikr, and the hours and hours of lectures on the seerah of the Prophet. These are all things that are certainly important, but in my opinion, rarely do we tackle real world issues using the knowledge that we have from our tradition, right? So very rarely have I heard, okay, let's talk about women's legal rights as Muslims. Let's talk about, you know, our financial obligations as men. Let's talk about you know, the real problem of you know, our interest-ridden economy, and how we can do our best to sort of mold our communities into something that's more Islamically permissible, right? You know, it's very easy to talk about all these things that are in the past, that are up in the sky, that you know, but they don't really help you on the ground. Like, I'm not suggesting these things aren't important, but they need to be coupled with the fact that we're people, we're here, and we have to deal with you know, some of the hard realities of what we deal with, right?
Definitely. And I do think that a lot of this is changing. You know, there's, I'm not endorsing, you know, Mufti Bank or anyone, but I feel like that if we have more open-minded Islamic scholars who actually are not scared to talk about women's rights, and, you know, women's financial rights, and empower women, I think that'll be great. We as a society and community can come in together and provide help for people who truly need it. So I just have a last question actually here. If sorry, I know we're going a little bit overboard. And the question is talking about financial abuse that comes from family members other than spouses. For example, women who are being abused from their fathers, brothers, or their mothers. Their salaries are taken away from them. How can they deal with this situation?
Wow. Yeah. These are very, very touchy subjects, right? So, and probably requires a lot more context and a more, you know, deep conversation. But let's just say, for, you know, the sister that asked the question, there needs to be some knowledge discussion here about Islam and what those rights are. Now, if the parents have a need, right, with respect to, well, we need this money to live, right? Yeah. You know, then figure out that piece, right? Maybe it isn't your whole salary. And if you are willing, at the end of the day, like, let's just make it very clear and simple, right? That money that you're earning is not anyone else's, right? Nobody can take that away from you. That's number one, right? So let's remember that. But number two is, why is that money needed, right? Is it because, well, you know, there are very limited needs or earnings, sorry, that are coming into the house and hence need to be supplemented? Okay, and that's fine. And if a request is, the other thing too is, like, parents, especially Arabs and South Asia, they're too proud to ask, right? They just take. And then they, you know, they wrap it around religion or culture and say, and then they shame you with that, right? So, you know, I think there has to be a conversation about like, why is this happening, right? And then there needs to be that willingness, right? That yes, I am willing to support, and if you say no, then they need to respect that as well, right? The other thing too is how to kind of, let's say, twist that around is, well, let's say they are providing for X, Y, and Z for you. Maybe they're paying for your cell phone bill and, you know, your car and your gas and all these things. You can say, well, you know, I'm working now, and instead of me giving you the money, right, I will just spend that on my own things that I'm using, right? So I'll pay for my own cell phone bill. So it's one less thing for them to do. I'll pay for my own car, insurance, gas, you know, transportation, meals, my own clothing. So then their responsibility really has been, you know, deduced down to just shelter, right? And the home cooked meal, right? To simplify things. Sometimes that conversation works very well. And, you know, just, you know, turning it around and saying, okay, well, what is the burden here, right? Because at the end of the day, you know, we don't want you to end up living on your own, right, and lose that family connection, because that's what's super important here, right, which is, you know, silat al-raham within Islam. And so I think that conversation is very, very important to really understand, right, why is this happening? And it's going to take an open-mindedness from every individual at the table that's willing to speak about this, right? Which is probably the hardest piece. But I think if it's approached from the respect of the deen, then, you know, everyone's willing to listen. And maybe, you know, maybe you bring in a third party. Sometimes, you know, it takes that third party, and maybe not a family member, maybe it's a community leader, like an imam of a mosque or a sheikh, that will come in and just basically talk about generally, not the specific situation, but talk about generally what those rights are, et cetera, et cetera. And then hopefully they'll start to come to that conclusion at some point in time, inshallah. But, you know, at the end of the day, dua is the biggest thing that can be done, because only Allah can change the hearts of the people, right? And if you make dua to change the hearts of the people that are affecting you in a positive way, then inshallah that hidayah and that nur will come in, and they will be able to see and have what I like to say is a meeting of the minds with respect to that specific.
Inshallah. And I think that's so true. It's just about having that positive conversation going on could really change the, you know, hardships and difficult times that we're going through. You know, with further due respect, if there's any remarks or comments that you would, you know, Mohamad or Jesse would like to make, I would like to conclude the session, just because I know we are over time.
Yeah, well, just thanks for the session. You know, it is a very important topic, something that is often overlooked, and you know, I felt like obviously Mohamad has more expertise on the fiqh side of things in this type of thing. But like, as I always say, and as I've been saying for the last 2 sessions, and you will continue to hear it, prepare yourself as though the worst could happen, right? And if you are in the worst situation now, you know, let's try to figure out a way to get out of it. But may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things easy for all of you. And jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Mohamad. I just like to
Jazakallahu khair.
Thank you. I'd just like to tell our audience and, you know, all the sisters and brothers out there that NISA helpline is there, you know, as use it as a resource to, you know, detach that stigmatism. If anybody needs assistance, you know, with whatever difficulties, challenges they are going through, they can always reach out to us. And if they need more information about, you know, as I said, we are a non-for-profit. However, if you need more information about financial questions, you can go to Manzil. You can see Manzil on Mohamad's shirt, and also Canadian Islamic Wealth. And you know, Jesse and Manzil Jesse and Mohamad could be more than helpful to answer any of those financial literacy questions. I would like to thank you again. I would like to thank everybody for watching. Please share these you know, messages and share this message about financial difficulties, investments, budgeting with your sisters, brothers, mom, dads, relative, friends, as we really need to come together as a Muslim community. Therefore, there are no gaps, there are no bridges, and we can, mashallah, and you know, help each other in future without, you know, having any sort of hardship. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Barakallahu feekum.